What's good, YouTube? It's Pay, and today I'm back with another video. But before I get into the video, if you're new here, I will explain to you the rules of how this page works. And if you aren't new here, you know how the rules work, but let me just give you a reminder. So basically, if you watch my content, you have to subscribe. It helps me out a ton. It's free. It doesn't cost you any extra effort or energy. And, it just helps me out a ton. And it's kind of like a handshake agreement that we have here. If you watch the content, you're going to subscribe. It's just the rules. But if you want to break the rules, I hate to be the guy to hand out the punishment, but I have to be. I have to put the foot down because who else is if it's not going to be me? If you don't subscribe to the channel, you will be forced to listen to They Got Amnesia, the album by French Montana, 7 times in a row, back to back to back. And then another 7 times, except we're going to play the album backwards. All right, so unless you want to sit there and listen to They Got Amnesia for the next 5 weeks or however long that would take, I suggest you subscribe to the channel. Look, I don't want to have to do that. I know that's a harsh punishment, a very harsh punishment, but that's just the rule. So just subscribe and you won't have to listen to They Got Amnesia. All right, but today I'm going to be talking about Roddy Ricch, man. And I just want to start off before I get to anything on this video. I want to clarify and say that I don't think Roddy Ricch is trash. Roddy Ricch is not a bad artist. Roddy Ricch is a good artist. He's a good rapper. I just need to get that out the way. I'm not a Roddy Ricch hater. I don't despise the guy. I think he makes good music. So just putting that out there. But in my life, I've absorbed a whole bunch of different types of media, whether that be basketball, football, anime, movies, TV series, MMA.
That is a dejected.
Like I've just absorbed a whole bunch of different WWE, a whole bunch of different forms of entertainment, and I like to kind of combine them in my head. I like to compare and contrast. I don't know why I said it like that. These things, I don't know why, but it's just what I do. So I've thought for a while now, since maybe about early to middle 2022, that Roddy Ricch kind of reminds me of Gohan from Dragon Ball Z. Now, if you don't know what Dragon Ball Z is, it's an anime series. I'm not going to break down the entire plot because, come on now. Like, what do you expect out of me? But just if you don't really know, look up the plot of Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z, Goku's the main character. He has a son named Gohan. Gohan has a lot of potential, but he just never cashes in on it. So that's kind of what I'm going to break down. I'm going to give you the reasons why I think Roddy Ricch is kind of parallel to Gohan, and then I'm going to break down individually pieces of the story that actually kind of apply to Roddy Ricch. So to start off with, Gohan has the most potential in the universe, pretty much, or out of any of the characters that we know in Dragon Ball Z. It's just solely speaking on Dragon Ball Z. Don't bring up Super or GT. But he has the most potential out of anybody in the universe. He is Goku's son. He has the mix of Saiyan blood and human blood, and he's just full of potential. Any type of work he does, he just like that, he shoots up in power, right? That's his whole thing. He has moments where he's beating up older guys. He's like 4 or 5 years old and he's fighting Saiyans. He's like 7 years old. Not even. He's like 6 years old when he's on Namek and he's fighting Frieza and his goons. He's fighting the Ginyu Force, doing all this stuff at an incredibly young age. He gets to a point where he's fighting Cell, the toughest being to ever be created in the history of the universe, and he defeats him. And he's the strongest guy in the universe. And then a time skip happens, and he just never really gets any better than he did when he was a little kid. And he doesn't really cash in on that potential in Z. Now, he gets a power boost towards the end of Z, where he gets his potential unleashed. But even still, he doesn't keep up with that towards the end of the story, and ends up getting passed up by pretty much all the main characters. Well, Goku and Vegeta, and Boo, but still. He gets passed up once again. So it's kind of like he has all the potential, he has all the skills, but he just never could put it together. And the reason that Gohan could never put it together is because he didn't really want to the same way his dad did. He didn't really have that drive, that work ethic. And his mom also wanted him to be a scholar. Now, I'm not going to apply that to Roddy Ricch because I don't know what Roddy Ricch's mindset is. I don't know what he wants to do with his career. But I think they're very similar in the fact that they have a lot of potential. They both are guys that people looked at and said, man, that's the guy. That's the guy who's going to be the best of this generation. That's the next Kendrick. People were saying that. Like, I'm not making this up. When Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial came out, people were like, this is the guy. People talked about Polo G, NBA Youngboy, and Roddy Ricch as the 3 next guys to push this generation into the future. That's who they talked about. And people viewed Roddy Ricch as the guy, as arguably the guy who's gonna be the top rapper of this generation. And that just kind of hasn't came to fruition. His recent stuff hasn't been horrible, but it just hasn't been good. And it hasn't been as good as it was back in 2019 or 2019, 2020. He just hasn't reached that level yet. And we all expected him to go from that level and to continue to go further. That's why I compare him to Gohan, because he has all the potential in the world. Roddy Ricch, there's not much Roddy Ricch can't do on a microphone. Like, I'm going to give him his credit. He's very talented. There's not much he can't do, but it just hasn't been piecing itself together in the past couple years. And it's been kind of a disappointment. It's not to say that he's trash. Again, I'm saying that. Roddy Ricch, if you see this, I don't think you're trash. I don't think you're a bad artist. But it just hasn't been piecing together the way we all thought it would. And it's kind of a letdown. It just is. You know, we all expected him to be the guy. And now he's not even in that conversation. Of course, he's still in the conversation as one of the best young rappers that we have. But he's not the guy or close to that really conversation anymore at this point. And so now to break it down into kind of some storyline similarities, right? So I'm going to, in Dragon Ball Z, there's basically three main sagas, right? The Frieza saga, the Cell saga, and the Buu saga. And then there's like little sagas that are part of each, like how the Saiyan saga, the early Saiyan saga is part of Frieza saga, and the Android saga is part of, so you know the story if you're watching this video, I assume. So the Frieza saga for Gohan is where we finally, or not finally, but we really get to see him as a character. We really get to understand him, and we come to a realization that, okay, this kid's really talented. He's got a lot of potential. And that is kind of like 2017 to 2018 Roddy Ricch, right? He's finally coming onto the scene, getting some eyes from the mainstream, and people are looking at him like, okay, this guy's got something. You know, he's not just your regular, oh, I'm a small rapper, listen to my tape. Like, no, he's got something. I would equivalent Gohan's time on Namek to the first Feed the Streets projects, where he's really kind of getting his feet wet, but you can see it's there. The talent's there, the pieces are there, and that's what we see with Roddy Ricch. That's where we got songs like Down Below or Die Young and stuff like that. Like those are the songs that we really saw him and said, okay, this is a guy with a lot of potential. This is a guy that can be a huge star. So those were those little pieces being built up. Same with Gohan, where he's fighting the Ginyu Force, putting up a good fight, fighting against Frieza's henchmen, doing all that stuff, fighting and running from Vegeta. Like, that's where we really start to see that. And I think those are pretty parallel with these two characters, a character and a human being. I don't know what to call it. And I think of like the moment where Old Man Guru, I think was his name, he kind of unlocks Gohan's potential. He puts his hand on his head. I think of the song Rich Forever as that kind of moment for me. That's honestly one of my favorite Roddy Ricch songs. It's a beautiful song. It's probably my favorite from him. It's not even on streaming services. It's on SoundCloud. But again, I'm just making parallels between those times in Gohan's life and Roddy Ricch's career. And then we move on to the Cell saga. Now, the Cell saga is where everything comes together for Gohan. Gohan becomes the man. He becomes literally the strongest being in the universe and has a form that nobody else has even dreamt of unlocking in the universe. He's Super Saiyan 2. He's the one that defeats Cell, the strongest being ever, and he ends that saga as the best. He ends that saga as the strongest. And that was, please excuse me for being antisocial, Roddy Ricch could do no wrong in 2019. The box was going crazy. His album was going crazy. He had the lit songs. He had the slow songs. He was doing the features. He had the song Ballin'. He was doing everything in 2019. He could not do anything wrong. And that's his Cell saga. That was his moment where everyone said, all right, that's our guy. That's the next big thing. That's the star. That's the guy who's going to carry the rap game. That's the guy who's going to carry the Dragon Ball Z storyline into the future. That was their moment. That was Gohan's moment. This was Roddy Ricch's moment. Him defeating Cell was Roddy Ricch's The Box going #1 and being in the charts for weeks upon months. That those two things are pretty similar in my opinion. We saw the rise in the early parts of the Frieza saga, and we saw the rise 2017, 2018. And then 2019 hits and the Cell saga hits, and we really see that potential start to come to fruition and stop being just potential and actually being reality. That's what that was. But even still, when they're the strongest in the universe, when Roddy Ricch is on top of the rap game, we still know that there's some more juice in there that hasn't been squeezed out. There's still some more in there that we could get from this guy. And I don't mean that in like a weird way. I don't know if that sounded weird, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's still stuff to be uncovered. And then we move into the Boo saga, and that's where things get kind of disappointing. I feel like that's where we are right now in Roddy Ricch's story. The Boo saga, we come back after a time skip of 7 years, and Gohan has not been working on his craft, and he's kind of gone stale. His power has not increased. If anything, his power's probably decreased a little bit. He's honestly worse than he was in the Cell games, and he still fights from time to time, but he's just not that guy anymore. And that's what's kind of happened with Roddy Ricch. I don't know if he's stopped working on rap. I'm not going to talk about his work ethic or his mentality or anything like that. I'm just looking at the quality of the product that we've been getting. It's just not as good. Live Life Fast was a boring project, just being honest. I'm not going to sit here and act like there wasn't good music on there, but it was pretty boring. And then Feed the Streets 3 was a step up from Live Life Fast, but again, still not very good, and not as good as Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial. And it's like, obviously, you know, we want everybody to improve album after album after album, but that's not realistic for everybody. You know, maybe in Dragon Ball Z, where if you're training, you're guaranteed to get stronger, that's different. But in music, sometimes you just don't get a better album than your best. That just happens. But it wasn't even really a good project, let alone close to being Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial. It just wasn't even good, really. So I feel like he's kind of fallen off a little bit in terms of quality. I'm not going to talk about his career and his numbers or anything like that, but I think that's my view of those two projects, and that's also pretty much the consensus fan opinion at this point, that he's just not as good as he once was. Now, Gohan does get a power boost in the Boo saga and becomes the strongest again, but then ends up losing to Boo, and then Vegeta and subsequently Goku and Boo pass him at the end. But the result is pretty much the same, in which Gohan's just not that guy. And I feel like that's kind of what's happened with Roddy Ricch. He's just not that guy right now. And I'm not saying this to say that he can never be that guy and that he'll never be better than he is right now and he's going to be stuck. That's not what I'm saying. Again, I'm not a Roddy Ricch hater. I like the guy. I like his music. I like some of the stuff on the new projects. I like the song Stop Breathing. But it's just, he hasn't really become what everyone was hyping him up to be. Everyone thought he would become. And that's not a horrible thing, because having the pressure to be the biggest star in rap, or one of the biggest stars in rap, that's a lot. So not becoming that isn't a bad thing. Not being the best ever or the best of your generation, that's not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, don't get it twisted. It's not a bad thing, but it's just that our expectations were extremely high for Roddy Ricch, and they just haven't been met. And maybe our expectations were too high. Maybe he struck lightning in a bottle. Maybe that was as good as it's going to get. But that's why I have drawn a lot of similarities between Gohan from Dragon Ball Z and Roddy Ricch. I just see them as kind of parallels of each other, kind of mirrors of each other. But I do hope that Roddy Ricch will get his comeuppance, and he will fulfill that potential that he has, because he has all the talent in the world. Don't get me wrong. He has everything you need to be a great rapper, a great artist. And I think that he can be. So I'm not saying that he won't be. Roddy Ricch, if you see this, I'm not a hater. I'm just talking about current status of your career and where I see it. And that's just my opinion. You know, I'm just some dude at home making videos in his bedroom, so don't take it too serious. But yeah, that's why I see Roddy Ricch as the Gohan of the rap game. And you know, maybe you disagree, maybe you agree, maybe this video was stupid and I shouldn't have made it, and I wasted my time and I wasted your time. But if you made it this far, regardless, I appreciate you so much. Leave a like, leave a comment, and remember to subscribe unless you want to listen to French Montana for the next 5 weeks in a row. That's on you. That's on you though. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, especially the project They Got Amnesia. You know, maybe it's some older French Montana, but They Got Amnesia? Come on now. So just leave a subscribe, but I appreciate you for watching. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Have a great day. Peace.